So for those of you who are new, my name is Rachel Fisher, and I'm the Member Services Librarian at CCS. I'm one of the co-chairs of the DEI Metadata Networking Group. Scott Brandwine is also one of the co-chairs. He is the Bibliographic Services Manager at SWAN. We decided to convene this group after identifying the need to discuss how to improve subject headings so that they can be more equitable and representative of the diversity of our communities that the libraries serve. The group is open to staff who work for any library in Illinois, not just public libraries. Academic and special libraries and school libraries are also welcome. The group will be more than just a networking group. Our goal is to be able to craft statements on best practices for DEI metadata. The final and approved statements will be posted on a website once it is built, so it will be available to the public. No one will be forced to comply with these statements. They can just be used as a reference for any librarian that needs documentation to provide to decision makers or for crafting catalog handbook sections. We have 3 working groups that have begun to meet already. These include the topics of immigration, LGBTQ+, and disabilities and accessibility. We would like to form another working group on Native American subject headings and need 2 or more additional volunteers before convening the group. We also need one of those volunteers to volunteer to chair the group. So if anyone is interested in the topic, please do let me know. If you'd like to volunteer, you can email me at my work email address or email Scott. I'll post mine in the chat. It's just rfisher@ccsliv.org. Spelled with the SCH like German. And so our first items on the agenda is to hear reports from our 3 existing groups. And so our first group on the agenda is the Immigration Working Group. Sarah Ferger is the chair of the group.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I am going to post a link in the chat of the draft that the Immigration Working Group has come up with so far. So what I wanted to do today is give a little bit of our process. And I know that there are some members of the working group here, and I just would like to say thank you so much for your time and efforts and energy. So what we have done when we convened is kind of looked at the work that's already been done. Immigration is a topic that's been kind of handled by a variety of different institutions. And we thought rather than start from scratch, we would see what those other institutions are doing, see what the history behind this particular set of terms is, and go from there. And what we found is that there are a variety of institutions, both in Illinois, local, and more further abroad, that have done a lot of work on this. So we collected a list of pretty common terms, created a mapping scenario from the pre-2021 term to the new term to what our working group recommendation would be. And we also put in some thought about mapping and actual implementation of that. We understand that a lot of libraries have a variety of factors that impact the possibility of implementation, right? From being in a consortium to time and energy and money and training. And so that is all in the document. So again, I have included the draft that we've come up with here, and you should be able to open and comment. And we're hoping that all the expertise in this group will give us something really solid that we could then circulate before approval.
Thank you, Sarah. We will send those links out again to the listserv after the meeting. Next on the agenda is the LGBTQ+ working group. Rachel Newland is the chair.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I'm the cataloging librarian at Schaumburg Library. There might be a weird echo in this room. I'm not sure. Okay. So we're not as far along as Sarah. We're still in the early phases of our draft, more like at the outline stage. We're still collecting resources from a lot of other folks that are doing similar work. So I've been in touch with a couple members of the Homosaurus editorial board that I've worked with in the past, and they have provided some feedback. I also put a call out on the Homosaurus Google group, which if you're not a part of, you could do a quick search on their webpage and find that. So I didn't get a huge response on there, but I did get something. Some were archives focused and some were, academic focused. So we're still kind of in the collection phase. We're waiting for feedback from a couple places, and we have the outline. We also are reviewing the Trans Metadata Collective's mandate for trans and gender diverse metadata document, which is in the draft stage. So if you look at it, you may see a lot of people commenting on it and that sort of thing, but it is out there, and it has also been mentioned on that Homosaurus Google group, so it's a place you can find it if you're looking. I'm really bad at talking and sending links, so if someone else wanted to do that on my behalf, that would be good. So we are reviewing that and hoping to borrow some of the shell of it, because it's really, really amazing work that they've done. And it does lean academic, so we'll probably have to bend some of the recommendations ourselves, but they pretty much cover the whole range of gender diversity, which is obviously going to be a big subset of our own recommendations. So we're hoping that we can rely on them for a good portion of that. Another thing is that Bree Watson, the person that was in charge of the Trans Metadata Collective, is hoping to do a similar thing for queer in general, the queer community. So we may be involved with that in like a parallel back and forth sort of way as we get along in the process. They told me that they were going to put a call out in July. So if anyone's interested in being on that committee, you can look out for that. So when we have our draft, we'll share it, but we're still in the early phases.
Thank you, Rachel. It'll be very interesting to see the draft as you complete it. Our next working group is the Disabilities/Accessibility Working Group, and Angela is the chair.
Hi, everyone. Can I share my screen to share the document?
Sure. One moment. I need to maybe make you a co-host to do that. Or Scott, can you make Angela a co-host?
Yeah, I'm on it. There you go. Did that change anything for you, Angela?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are in our very, very beginning stage. We only met once last month for the first time. There are 6 of us on our group. It's Rachel Fisher, Nancy George, Rebecca Naur, Lynn Rubio, and Lisa Sheminsky. I just want to share some goals and project ideas we have. The first one we're working on is research issues on the topic of disabilities, accessibility, and cataloging. And we're just gathering resources that would be useful on this topic. Next is the question about what can be done to enhance the accessibility of catalog records, or the OPAC. Are there resources available that catalogers need to know about? Maybe plan a webinar, either led by the working group or an expert on the topic. Is there a statement that can be made on the networking group's website to recommend best practices for catalogers? This can include a list of recommended resources, and possibly a website not yet created for the Rails DEI metadata groups could include best practices for cataloging for disabilities and accessibility, including notes fields that could be useful to display, such as the 532 field, and maybe documentation of links to external resources. Again, we are early in the planning stages, so welcome any feedback or suggestions or resources that you might know about. Please send them forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Angela. We have 2 discussion items on the agenda. And the first one is related to a link that we included on harmful language in archival materials. I'm not very familiar with this topic, being an employee at a public library consortium, but there might be some academic librarians out there, and this could definitely affect public library books. The statement on harmful language was from University of Pittsburgh, and they had a policy that when harmful or offensive language is supplied by the creator of the original archive materials to describe them, they believe it is the best practice to retain this material and not to censor it to alter the historical record, and to maintain an understanding of the context of creation. So I could understand that this could be in older books, that could be in special collections as well, or even in potentially offensive material. I know there's been an issue in which some libraries have been wondering how to handle books related to gender identity that could be offensive, because there are patrons that do request it and want it to be purchased. And so there could be issues like how the summary of that book is described. And some of the suggestions they have on this website are to include like a content warning and a note, so that that everyone is aware that they are aware of the issues and that they have highlighted it. So does anyone have any experiences dealing with this issue, or any plans that you've been working on?
I can talk a little bit about this. When I saw it on the agenda, I was really excited because we are doing this here. We have a draft, and I am going to figure out how to try and share it while talking at the same time, something that's incredibly hard for me to do. But I saw the ones on the cataloging lab, and I thought public libraries should have a version of this too. So ours is less focused on the historical context and more on the practical context, answering questions of why may you see something that looks a certain way, or what's the process for this, like how did we end up with this certain term. So it is a little bit different, but our director's been really supportive of it. It's currently sitting with her, and she's going to read through it. We're going to find a place for it on our website. It's not going to be board approved. It's just going to be there for people to read, and we'll be considering it a living document, something that can change over time. I will share it, but I'm super interested to see if other places are thinking about doing this.
Okay, great. I think you can put an attachment in the chat if you click by the word everyone. There's like a little piece of paper. Adrian shared a link to a statement that she helped to write for the Boston Athenaeum, and it was based on the Pittsburgh statements. And there's also the link from Rachel in the chat. Are there any specific items that any of you have found, like examples that you could share?
So we used the cataloging lab ones as a base, and then we worked. Me and my boss worked on making it more applicable to public libraries, but there really weren't a ton to base it off of. So I mean, it still kind of has an academic viewpoint. So I mean, it's hard to find public libraries, especially ones that have like even a place to put this, right? So much is outsourced. So that was sort of some of the problems we ran into.
Yeah, Rachel, with regard to your question, I couldn't think of any specific material or resource that these statements would necessarily apply to. And I also hesitate a little bit to give examples. I feel like maybe that could be seen as like highlighting them in some way unintentionally. So I think for me, my opinion is that this is almost like more of like a best practice, like a statement of intention to reduce harm rather than a response to a specific material, resource, or type, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it would be a great idea to have a similar statement on the website once we get that up.
And I will say that we are in the midst of our strategic plan right now. And I am hoping to get something on the strategic plan about DEI metadata initiatives in the hopes that this document could serve as a basis of intention, like Sarah was saying. It would be really nice to be able to look at this and see like the section that I have where it's basically a list of things we're either doing or would like to do. Like that was the most important part for me because I would love to revisit it year by year and see how many of those things we're really hitting.
There is a comment on an example of the Dr. Seuss imagery in the books. Like you remember that coming up recently. And I guess another example for public libraries could be like Disney movies, the old Disney movies. Because I know those are still purposefully on Disney Plus. Are there any other comments on this issue? Well, our next topic on the agenda for discussion is related to collection development. And I don't actually have any experience with it myself. It is on the topic of assessing the e-content for materials related to ones that would not fit within your collection development policies. Is there anyone that has experience with this topic that would like to discuss it or
I put this forward. This is Scott. Excuse me. Because we recently did have an example of this coming up, and of course I don't remember the actual title that it was, but we have the complication that we ran into was because we're a consortium, we were doing a group purchase of e-content on behalf of excuse me, a number of our members, and one resource was found to be sort of, it had anti-trans bent, which is not within the purview of what one of our member libraries decided was what they wanted to offer. Could we remove that from their collection? When you're doing a group purchase like that, it sort of adds a sort of an extra layer of difficulty because you're sort of making this decision on behalf of a larger group of people. And so that is something that, I mean, we resolved the issue and it's good, but I was just wondering if anybody else has done sort of maybe a more comprehensive examination of their e-resource collections, and if you had new methodology for that, or whether you've just come across this issue in general and how you've dealt with it. That's kind of why I put this on here.
Hey, Scott, Sarah from Joliet. So as you know, Joliet is part of the Pinnacle Consortium, and when the whole hoopla came up, I know many of us reached out to our team, Louise Svalha, who is our adult services manager, and brought this to her attention. And she informed me that we don't really do like group purchasing in that way. For this reason. And so basically it was as she said, like a non-issue, that these group purchases, if you evaluate each one-on-one like you would with physical collections, it doesn't happen. And I was like, well, that's great, but what about, huge consortiums that are more than, 7 libraries? But yeah, it seems like it's really the only way to kind of get around or avoid that issue.
Has anyone else dealt with this, or does anyone have concerns about this? Like, I'm also wondering if this is something that I need to, and I will go back to my own membership to talk about it, but like whether we need to have some sort of stance to kind of prepare ourselves for the future. Is the problem that, I mean, so one of the other things is that it's fairly rare. I mean, I think for the most part, the things that we're seeing coming through our e-resources are pretty much within either non-controversial one way or the other, because it's about a dog, or it's within kind of what we would consider to be equitable and progressive. So maybe it is sort of a non-issue on the whole, but I kind of feel like we want to be prepped for it. So this is probably something we'll go back to our membership at least for, and have a conversation about, just for that time in the far future when it does come up, or the near future, who knows.
Well, this isn't directly relevant to your point, Scott, but I know that we are revising our collection development policy, and we have been for a while here. And one of the things that we are doing is making sure there's something in there about streaming resources, just to make sure that we have something we can point to in the eventuality that we do have to remove something in that way. And I know that we're at the point now where our document is with the Office of Intellectual Freedom, and they're going to provide us some specific language for that particular point, but they are, of course, incredibly overwhelmed. So when that will happen, we don't know, and we are not going to rush it, of course.
That sounds good. Yeah, streaming. I mean, I hadn't even really considered the media aspect of it. Our example was a print book, ebook, I believe. You see with the wealth of things you get in like sort of the self-publishing world, it's such a boon for writers and creators, but at the same time, it allows so much garbage onto the scene, and some of that does sneak through. So.
One thing that came up in our consortium's discussion is that with Overdrive, we have a lot more control over what is included, whereas with Hoopla, I just found the email from Louise again, and she said that we're limited to accept their catalog by price point and not by content. And I see Christina is here, so maybe she can speak more about Penn Digital if she's got more info.
Yeah, so for the Pinnacle Cooperative, for our Overdrive Consortium, we choose every single title that is added, except for magazines. That is kind of a one-time purchase for everything that's accessible for that. Regarding Hoopla, we each have individual subscriptions. However, our Hoopla rep has said that we are able to block certain titles and content. We just have to contact them. So it's kind of on a library by library basis. And you can also restrict by prices as well. A lot of libraries do that too to keep their budget down. They say that users can only see material that's like $3 or less. So there is some customization that can happen with that. And yeah, so there was that whole hoopla over hoopla and some of the materials, including some of the neo-Nazi propaganda that was included as well. I think it's also an important thing to note and be careful of when you are reviewing things to be removed, how or when does it cross over into censorship issues?
Are there any other comments on the topic? maybe a really short meeting today. We have plenty of time to discuss any other issues. Are there any other topics that anyone would like to discuss today before we end the meeting?
I guess I could bring something else up. I'm Scott again. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting a sentence out without panting for 5 minutes afterwards. But one of the things that we brought this up at our meeting in, I don't remember if it was January or November or kickoff, but it's weird it's had again. And it's just I'm still curious about mechanically how to deal with changing an author's name when they've, transitioned, and if I don't have that direct line to NACO or getting that immediate change, and sometimes those changes take a while anyway. Like, what can I do in my system to ensure that the name is presented in its newest form, yet we don't lose the searchability? And in the past, the examples that have come up for us have been, either folks who didn't have a lot of name recognition, or maybe had just one or two things where they were a contributor in our system. We've just come, and I'm sure people have dealt with this months in the past, but N.D. Stevenson, the graphic novel author, excuse me, is presenting a few more problems because they're we have a lot more of their work in our system, and I personally, I knew this person's work before I had a lot of our users do, and I feel weird stripping their dead name from our record entirely because I don't want their discoverability to suffer because of it. So I'm just really curious if there's any process documentation any of you have down for what if you're storing these names together anywhere else. We don't have the benefit of having our authority indexed in our discovery layer. So the authority file is kind of not part of this discussion for us. It has to be something in the bibliographic records. And I'm sort of at a loss for what to do. There's also the idea of the local 790 field, the places, but those aren't necessarily indexed in our discovery layer either. So just as a more immediate solution, I kind of wanted something that was more of a hack, I guess.
Oh, Scott, this is not really relevant to your point exactly, which I keep doing to you, and I'm sorry about that. But inside the chat, everyone's talking about being willing to do it in authority records. And I will say there's a list of volunteers on the trans metadata document. So if you are a NACO cataloger and you're fine making those gender changes and updates, you can add your information on that document, and it will be a place that people can go to reach out to a NACO cataloger to make those changes, which does not at all help you, Scott, when you need to make the changes in the bib records. That's hard, and I don't have an answer for you.
It's fair. I've got a group of people. We're going to hash this out. Hopefully this Friday we have a meeting, but yeah, I was just curious if there was anything that anybody had on hand to share. But that's still a good thing to know, Rachel. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and Scott, this is Joy.
Hi, Joy.
Hi. Yeah, long time no see. The only suggestion, I can make from, like a catalog, as I am a NACO library. However, I'm still new enough where it's like, I'd be hesitant to make that kind of change. I'd be contacting my mentor. But whatever I would do or whatever I would suggest right now, I would pattern it after Caitlyn Jenner. Go in and look at, because basically I actually went in and I searched the authority file for Bruce Jenner, and it brought up that he is now Caitlyn Jenner. And it, to me, looks like a very well thought out record. And if I were to do anything, that's what I would pattern off of. how helpful that's going to be to what Swan's going to need, I don't know. Just throwing that out there. That was my first thought when you started talking about this.
Is this something that could be done like a discovery layer to pull from, say, a 245 delimiter C instead of a 100 to display? Is that something that's workable with the ILS?
That's something that we had done in our previous discovery layer. We just migrated over the past year to a new one where I believe, you know, I'd have to ask them. I believe it sort of does that. So we may have like keyword searching under control. We may have author searching under control. And then, yeah, you're right. Maybe I do have to take a second look to see. Maybe this is a non-issue if I make this kind of just changing that display title.
Yeah, I don't know if it. I mean, I agree that it's tricky, but the only thing I could think of is that, you know, especially for people who are transitioning, that name change is going to show up a lot faster on newly published works than authority files, right? So if you can pull display from a different section of your record, that would kind of maybe get around an authority issue. But that also might complicate things if you know, your previous dead names or non-usable names in previous work, then so it might be a tricksy little situation. It might be like a complicated mapping issue, but that could be a solution.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. Thank you.
Gretchen
We
had
do
another.
that in Viewfind. We do that. I mean, it's mapped out to pull from all the fields, and you'll get a hit on any of them. Of course, you're not in Viewfind, but there could be, you know, you could use some similar logic or language if it's possible.
Gretchen had a suggestion in chat to have a searchable field that's not viewable.
Yeah, that's an enhancement request we have submitted with the developers on our new discovery. We're using Aspen, by the way.
Okay.
We just switched to Aspen, and that is definitely something we have in the pipeline to get developed. It's not there yet, unfortunately, but that would make this a heck of a lot easier for sure. At least as a interim solution for specific cases like this one. I appreciate you hashing this out with me. This was helpful. I know we haven't come to an answer, but this helped me organize some thoughts.
And as several people pointed out, there are quite a few of us in Rails or other places that are, you know, I feel like there should be a list somewhere beyond, like on the Rails listserv of NACO certified libraries that might be helpful in getting some of these changes a little bit faster, especially for perhaps like local or less popular or less published, less prolific authors and creators.
Yeah, that's the other thing I figured with this, you know, ND Stevenson, like surely this would have been changed by now. And so I'm thinking like, oh, maybe if I check again next week, my problems will go away, but that hasn't happened yet. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Are there any other topics that anyone's interested in discussing today? Okay, well, since there are no other topics, we can adjourn the meeting, and I will post the recording to YouTube and send out the links to documents to comment on as soon as I can get the notes finished.